Welcome to Truth by Billie Beene. Today's date is April 18, 2026, time in Texas, about 10 a.m. Some of the things we'll cover. G2, KP5, President Trump okays LSD plus, and the U.S. military, we now have substantiated, is actually fighting against Iran, Russia, and China. And we see Russia prepping to hit NATO. So let's get started. So today, April 18, we are to have from the sun via a coronal hole on the sun, a G2 geomagnetic storm giving us a KP index maybe of 5 or 6, meaning the top northern one-third of the U.S. could see auroras tonight. And we have this from YouTube Space Weather, formerly suspicious observers. Yeah. So the human threat, we have 2 times our normal threat on Earth from an increase in radiation from the sun because our electromagnetic shield has weakened so much. But we have now a combo effect on human health. We're experiencing increased radiation from the sun, plus the electromagnetic effect of 5G. So that's going on. And now we have this. We have President Trump signing an executive order this morning okaying psychedelics. That would include LSD, mushrooms, mescaline, peyote, San Pedro cactus plus. That these psychedelics were banned by a 1970s law that was really to take down the hippie movement inside the U.S., make love, not war, because these chemicals, these substances produce in the brain an increase in serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine, similar chemicals that are activated in the brain when we are in love. Yes, we've heard many times being in love described as walking on air and, the person having like a glazed look. That's because those are natural increases in brain chemicals. So the psychedelic substances also produce similar effects in the human brain and are a definite cure for human depression, as well as demonstrating a significant help to our vets who are suffering from PTSD and so on. Now, I know recently I reported Mike from Around the World brought out that Big Pharma had some type of shot you could take that would last for 90 days and get rid of any addiction. So I believe it's along these lines also. Also, President Trump heard a program on Joe Rogan recently regarding the psychedelics. He had Health Secretary RFK Jr. look into it, and Dr. Oz, and now today, so that was 1 week ago. So in 1 week, President Trump was able to bring about FDA approval of using psychedelics for people suffering from depression and PTSD and other things in a controlled environment. So we know LSD is a substance that produces hallucinations, but also activates within the human brain very positive brain chemicals, like being in love. So way to go, President Trump. A significant help to our vets suffering from PTSD and for people suffering from long-term depression and for people who are trying to kick an addictive habit. So way to go. Now I have more feedback from my Patriot subscribers. So I brought out on my last video, Walmart equals a safe house. And that reports that people were seeing empty containers in Walmart parking lots. Now I have additional information from other Patriot subscribers saying they're seeing similar things in big box stores like Target and Kroger. So my Patriot subscriber says, this week I noticed at Kroger empty containers all across the parking lot. And at Target I noticed many new people working in the store I had not seen before. And they were massively stocking the shelves with many items that in the last few months I had to order from Amazon. So we see, I have Patriot subscribers from different parts of the U.S. talking about similar things. Empty containers in big box stores, Walmart, Kroger, and something unusual also going on in the big box store, Target. So I submit, keep your eyes open, and if you see anything, well, send me a comment. Thank you so much. We have this from Daily Mail. Now, President Trump, in the last week or so, also has been brought up to speed on the 10 missing scientists, and he even had an intel brief on this in a skiff. And we know these 10 missing scientists have gone missing, are turned up deceased, with no autopsies allowed on their bodies. So we don't know actually if the person said to be deceased is actually the missing scientist. For all we know, they could all be missing somewhere else, and none of them deceased, but, you know, another person's body was put in their place. We don't know. This does sound like a conspiracy, but we have scientist number 11 added to this list, who disappeared a couple of years ago. Amy Esridge, and allegedly she committed suicide in Huntsville, Alabama, 34 years old. But she's added to this list also. Now, the weird thing is, and these people were all associated with anti-gravity technology, space, engineering, big tech, and were associated with NASA and Los Alamos. Now, the weird thing is we're also hearing that similar disappearances of scientists working in the same field is being reported in other nations, particularly China and Russia. So something's going on. But President Trump has, in the last week, been brought up to speed on it. We have this. We saw recently Representative Swalwell, Democrat, California, dropping out of the California governor's race, also resigning from Congress, House of Representatives, as well as Tony Gonzalez from Texas. Now we understand there are 22 more to go in the House and the Senate who are really up to their eyeballs in some very bad things. So that's going on. And we have this. We have also, so we had a ceasefire begin Friday night, today's Saturday, at midnight, to last for 10 days between Israel and Lebanon. Now, what we're hearing today is that Israel is hitting some locations in Lebanon. Now, we were to understand this was to be a ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon. And that Hezbollah, the proxy arm from Iran, said, you can make all the ceasefires you want, but that doesn't affect us. Now, Israel was given the leeway to also, of course, defend itself. If Hezbollah was going to fire on Israel, Israel could defend itself. So we understand Israel made 2 hits this morning on Lebanon. We do not have clarification yet as to why, but that's going on. And we have this. We have President Trump. Okay. During President Trump's first term in Iran, a General Soleimani passed away, and he was the inventor of roadside bombs that killed and maimed many U.S. military soldiers. And so that was part of our reasoning for going to war against our conflict with Iran, in addition or in support of Iran not being allowed to get a nuke. I submit, and I have maintained for decades, that Iran already has nukes. I don't know how they would launch them, but I believe they do have them. And we see the U.S. military blockade working. Now, there's been confusion about this blockade. So we have Iran. We have the Strait of Hormuz. Here's Oman. The U.S. military blockade is from Oman across this way. It's not directly in the Strait of Hormuz, which is this area right here. The U.S. military blockade is outside the Strait of Hormuz. So we see yesterday Iran saying, the Strait of Hormuz can open as long as you pass through our route and you pay us $2 million. And, but you have to take down the blockade. So the U.S. military is not taking down the blockade. And so what we saw this morning is that Iran is firing upon ships now passing through the Strait of Hormuz. We do have U.S. intel reports that at least 2 vessels this morning were hit by gunfire from an Iranian gunboat, a small speedboat. So apparently they still have some of those. We're hearing also that the U.S. military has turned around 23 ships. The blockade is only against ships going to and from Iran ports. So that's going on. And we have this. The IRGC this morning fired upon 2 vessels. We don't have identities yet on the vessels. But the U.S. military maintains the blockade, which is significantly harming both Iran and China in terms of oil. We have this from the BBC. So we also have out in this area, we have out in the Arabian Sea, we have a Chinese spy ship that the U.S. military is monitoring. But this U.S. Chinese spy ship is collecting data, and we understand the process is also Chinese satellites are collecting data, and the data goes to Russia. Russia increases and processes the visual impact of the raw data that China is collecting, and also interprets the military locations of U.S. military troops and equipment, ships, bases, and so on. So we're actually in a military conflict with Iran, Russia, and China. So that's going on. And we have this. Yeah, Russia and China collect satellite intel. They process it, make it visually clearer, then give it to Iran for Iran to target U.S. military ships, troops, equipment, bases. China collects the intel in multiple ways, including their Chinese spy ship, sitting just a short distance from the U.S. military around Iran. Russia interprets and processes, then gives to Iran. So we see Russia and China actively engaged in a warlike activity against the U.S. military and the American people. We have this from 2CTV that, so allegedly Iran was to have talks with the U.S. again in Pakistan. And we see Pakistan up to its eyeballs in this hot mess. Pakistan is mediating the talks between the U.S. and Iran, and yet Pakistan is sending the head of its military into Iran to assist Iran with military action against the U.S., and Pakistan is sending its prime minister to Saudi Arabia, and also sending 15,000 troops to Saudi Arabia to help defend Saudi Arabia against Iran. Pakistan is in a hot mess. And Pakistan is the route through which China is sending much of its weapons and intel to Iran. Russia is sending weapons and intel to Iran also over the Caspian Sea. So we see Russia and China also up to their eyeballs in this hot mess. We see Russia, China, Pakistan, and Iran colluding against the U.S. military. So that's going on. So there were supposed to be talks again in Pakistan Monday. However, this morning, Iran fired upon two ships inside the Strait of Hormuz. And Iran says it's not going to engage in talks until the U.S. military takes down their blockade. I got this to say to Iran. The ceasefire the U.S. agreed to is up next Wednesday. Heads up, Iran. So that's going on. And we have this. President Trump to the IRGC. President Trump Friday put out that the Strait of Hormuz is open. The IRGC came out, and there were big disruptions between the multiple factions inside Iran. Arachi, the foreign minister, made one statement, and the IRGC said to Arachi, "Shut up." And it's not known exactly who can speak for Iran, but there are multiple reports of chaos going on inside Iran between the multiple factions there. And we have this. We have also, so there were supposed to be talks Monday, but Iran today, Saturday, said, we're not coming unless you drop that blockade. The U.S. military blockade involves 15 U.S. warships and 10,000 troops and is working just fine to turn ships away from going into Iranian ports. So that's going on. And also depriving China of oil. We have this from Monkeyworks, that Europe is down to about 6 weeks of jet fuel, meaning we should see major impacts on Europe and their ability to put planes in the air very soon, because Europe is also being deprived of oil. And we have this from Fox, that Iran continues to execute Iranian unarmed civilians. Day in and day out, the psychopaths, IRGC, are continuing to execute its own citizens who are talking out against the government. And we know in Iran, when a woman is raped, she is found guilty of the rape and executed. And we have this. So Iran continues to execute its own citizens. So U.S. intel, today, Iran allegedly said ships could pass through its route and pay it $2 million. But this morning, we have verified reports by 2 vessels who were fired upon this morning by Iran. Oh, and when that happened, the UK and France said, well, now that there's continued gunfire, we can't send ships to the Strait of Hormuz to get it open. We can only do that after the U.S. Takes care of this conflict. Then, when there's no more gun shooting, UK and France can come in. It'll be a great photo op for us, and we can take credit for opening the Strait of Hormuz. I got this to say to the UK and France. Shut up. The American people are awake. Didn't we just see you not only saying the U.S. couldn't fly over your airspace to hit Iran, as the U.S. stands up against a monster government who has nukes, I believe, and would use them against America and Europe and the rest of the world. So I got this to say to the pukes in Europe. Shut up. But not only did Europe say you can't use our airspace, they said you can't use the airspace over U.S. military bases in Europe to hit Iran. So that cost the U.S. military billions of dollars, because the U.S. then had to launch hits on Iran from America 18 times. 30-hour trips. I got this to say to Europe. The U.S., the American people want the U.S. out of NATO. And I got this to say to President Trump. Let the European pukes defend themselves. So that's going on. And we saw this morning, 2CTV, based in UK, had reporters in going to Paris, France, I believe, and Macron, an exemplary example of communism at work, arrested the UK reporters. Why? Because in Europe, free speech is not allowed. So that's going on. And we have this. Yeah. So we have this also going on. So we saw, now we have Iran. I'll draw another map here, because now we see with the U.S. Not taking up for Europe, and a split obvious in between the U.S. and NATO. We see, so we have Russia, Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. Well, the NATO nutballs, the European Union nutballs, Friday, we're launching, so Russia comes right up to a border with Finland. The nutballs were launching drones into Russia. That happened, Thursday. And Friday, then we see Russia putting troops right here. Now, I made a prediction some months ago that Russia would take what's called the Suwalki Gap, and that's between Lithuania and Poland, and they would take a part of Moldova, Transnistria, where they have Russian troops and it's Russian people. But I said Russia will take the Suwalki Gap and Transnistria when after the U.S. is out of NATO. And we see a virtual situation where the U.S. is only loosely aligned with NATO. And we see then these European nutballs launching drones directly into Russia. Russia now standing up its troops. Now, Article 5 of NATO, a hit on one is a hit on all, we'll all defend, does not apply when the NATO nation initiates the hits on another nation. Article 5 of NATO only applies when a NATO nation is hit by a non-NATO nation, or it could be another NATO nation, in an unprovoked attack. Here we see NATO nations directly attacking Russia. So, hey, Europe, your leadership appears to be on the same level as the leadership in Iran, not attached to the real world. So this concludes my update. It's good to be in prayer for America, President Trump, the U.S. military, and world peace. I love you, and I'll see you soon.